Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and it's time for this week's One Last Thing with co-host Slava Cooperstein. Slava, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Ken. How are you?
I can't complain. We're at the bye week here, and I said this on other shows, but I want to repeat it again. I hate the bye week normally. This week, everything about this bye week is pleasant to me. It's late in the season. The Ravens are, have a chance to get healthy from some substantial injuries. They are finally harvesting the fruit from not taking that bye after the London trip, earlier. And, it'll be a relaxing Sunday to watch some other NFL teams stumble. That becomes unrelaxing pretty quickly when I sit in front of the TV and watch the Steelers or Browns play. But it's an opportunity for that. I'm very happy, obviously, with where the Ravens are right now. I wish they had one more win, but they are where they are, and they're in position to have a shot at the 1 or the 2 seed.
Yeah, they've positioned themselves quite nicely at this stage in the season, and this bye week probably is coming at the right time with a number of guys nursing some injuries, which I think we're going to get into as some of the things that they can kind of address over the course of this bye week.
Yeah. Absolutely. And especially concussion protocol is a tricky thing. And the injury to Matabike, obviously one of their most important players, period. Having 2 weeks instead of 1 to get him back on the field through that concussion protocol is enormous.
Absolutely.
Not everybody gets through, but if you looked at the curve of how long it takes people to get through in terms of cumulative recovery time, you'd see a lot of recoveries occur the first week, a lot more occur the second week. And then you don't have. There are some lingering concussion problems that are longer than that. Don't get me wrong, but most are recovered, I think, by 2 weeks. So this is a very nice time to have the bye week for him.
Yeah, and the defense as a whole, just having played the number of snaps that they played, in not just in terms of what not being able to get off the field, but also in terms of the sort of overall inefficiency of the offensive performance last week. That defense was gassed, and they're going to really appreciate having this extra time off.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Where would you like to start in terms of, you want to talk offense, defense, special teams, and coaching? I know we each came up with some of each type, but where would you like to start?
We could start with offense. I can kick us off. I think one of the things that I would look at for the offense is better in-game adjustments from Monken. And whether that comes in the form of sort of the personnel groupings that they're practicing in, or whether Monken needs to empower Lamar more to check out of certain plays based on what he sees. I think the Chargers game really showed a complete lack of in-game adjustment on the offense's part. The O-line was just having an incredibly difficult time, and that's due to a number of factors, not the least of which Ronnie Stanley obviously not performing up to par, being injured, playing through some things, and also Khalil Mack and the rest of the Chargers really just playing a great game. And there are a number of things that the Ravens could do to stem the tide of the pass rush, and they really didn't seem interested in doing any of them.
It's definitely on my list is a very similar thing, which is find a way to manufacture time and space for Lamar in the absence of quality offensive tackle play. And right now they're doing a lot to help Moses. And he had he struggled. He allowed 1 sack to Mack. The other sack allowed was on his side by his man, but it was after 3 seconds. So that he did his job on that play, blocking his guy 12-6, and then he came back into the play. I don't have a problem with that. He missed 5 other blocks, though, where he lost that block at the line of scrimmage. And that was despite having some significant help in this game. So I think, he and Stanley and Moses are both concerns at this point. I don't know what you can do, because there is no other left tackle out there, not on the team, unless you want to go with McCary. He's been a full grade level better than Stanley in terms of how he's graded out this season for me. 0.71 raw score to 0.60, which is just unbelievably bad for Stanley. I don't know how else you do it other than you go ahead and you scheme for more help for Stanley, and you can do that via help blocks. You can chip on that side. You can do max protect plays. Of course, you better not show a pattern to your opponent in terms of max protect, or they'll just come up and zero blitz you. A lot as you're trying to do that. I don't I don't see an easy way they're going to do it, and they face a number of very high-quality pass rush teams down the stretch. We talk about San Francisco. Miami has some guys now. Jacksonville has Allen and Trayvon Walker, and Pittsburgh has, of course, Watt and Highsmith. We're acting like that's a win because it's a home game or whatever, but it's going to be a tough game, and the Ravens are going to need to get through, and the tackles are going to be very tested.
Yeah, I mean, look, every sort of, every move in football and every other sport has a counter move, right? And every counter move has its advantages and disadvantages. But, the one thing that doesn't really make sense to me is to continue doing the thing that's not working. And I think that's what we saw a lot of in the game. It's obvious the offensive line is struggling. So, if Stanley is struggling to the extent that you can't do the things that you want to do with him, then, maybe it's time for McCary to come in. But if you don't want to do that, you need to help Stanley out. And there are a number of ways to do that, right? You could run the ball more. You could, get some very quick passes off. I feel like the Ravens are allergic to screen passes and hot reads and things like that. They want to let every single route develop, and it's just extremely frustrating. Like that's not working in that game situation, and they need to really think about what they're doing to help their guys out and put them in the best situations possible. And this bye week will help them do that, I hope.
I want to stick with this for one more second, because if you look at the difference between how the scripted plays work for the Ravens, which were pretty damn effective, particularly on the second drive, but a little less so on the first, there's a really good set of scripted plays. And then they got into the game a little further. Obviously, there were adjustments made by the Chargers, but I think the Ravens got away with some things that could work better. They were probably a little bit more pass happy than I would like. A lot of their runs were coming out of scrambles and not coming out of their just running the ball. Getting to the end of the game with Mitchell having as many times in the game, I was a little unsatisfied with his number of touches per time in the game, which is something I would like to see. And obviously, if you're looking for one guy who looked pretty good as an extended target in this game, I thought that 11-yard throw, I think it was to Mitchell late, which provided a key first down, was one of the guys who actually found space as time chewed down. And there wasn't a lot of that. There weren't a lot of extended plays in this game. But when it happened, I thought that he was one of the guys. That's obviously one of the things this team is missing right now.
Yeah, I mean, well, according to Harbaugh, it's impossible to tell whether a rookie can handle anything, ever. So, he's, it's J.K. Dobbins' rookie season all over again, right? Mitchell is, until Keaton Mitchell proves that he can't handle it, I say, keep feeding him, because the results are really good. Yeah. So the next thing I'd go with the offense is to take stock of where Ronnie Stanley's health is right now. He seems to really be battling through some things. Whether it's his knee or ankle or whatever, he's been banged up this season. And the next game coming out of the bye is an NFC game against the Rams, and so I think the Ravens should seriously consider whether the bye week is enough time to get Ronnie Stanley right, because we have some really incredibly consequential games coming up. I mean, they're all consequential, but
right.
Some games against the AFC opponents, which could really have a significant impact on our seeding. And it's really better to have Ronnie Stanley at 100% strength or whatever 100% is going to be for him these days than what we're getting. You can't tell me that a fully healthy McCary is worse than what we saw last week. So, this notion of clinging to Stanley just because he is the starter or the, highest paid guy or whatever, I don't think that should get in the way of making an honest assessment of whether Patrick McCary is at 100% health is better than what we're getting out of Ronnie.
It's a very fair question, I think, at this point. I will say this, and this is not to say that taking Ronnie out there would go in this direction, but you can't afford to give up this game against the Rams. It's too important as being the easiest game remaining on the schedule to give it up. And the Ravens have to be concerned about about multiple things here. One is their seeding. Two is, are they going to win the division? Because that's not a sure thing. If they lose 3 ball games here, pretty damn good chance the Steelers pass them. If they lose 2 ball games and lose to the Steelers, it's possible they won't finish, because the Steelers have pretty easy schedule down the stretch. It's just I think there's reasonable. There are good reasons why they want to have all 3 those guys active on game day. You could try something different, by the way, if rotation is the way to do it. Maybe that's an option here. And the other thing you could try some different schematic things in terms of getting Stanley covered up, where you use 6-man line or unbalanced line as to change his pass rush responsibilities slightly. So there are things they can do. I don't have the answer. And the bigger question looming over this whole organization like a dark cloud is the incredible barrier of entry costs they're going to have to replacing Stanley, which may have to come as early as 2024.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I just, I think of that as sort of tomorrow's problem. And today's problem is, who's the best left tackle that we can field against the Rams? And I'm not. I have sincere doubt that is currently Ronnie Stanley.
Okay. All right. Well, fair enough. I'll go with the second offensive problem. That is the Mark Andrews replacement. So this was a game where it would have been nice to see if somebody stepped up. It's the Chargers. It's one of the weakest secondaries that the Ravens will face the rest of the year. It's the weakest that they will face the rest of the year. Terrible yards per target percentages are numbers, but they did make a bunch of changes in the secondary. They started the new guy Dean. Dean Leonard, was it? Leonard Dean? I don't remember, but he has a Dean in his name, Deane. Derwin James, Asante Samuel, and Alohi Gilman, all 3 of those guys have absolute rock bottom yards per target that in aggregate are about 10 yards per target, or a little bit higher even, because Alohi Gilman is like 11.9. Derwin James, 9.9 yards per target this season. So I thought, going after those guys, really testing them, makes all kinds of sense. Now, in some ways, when you're really testing a cornerback, the route has to develop for the guy like Bateman, perhaps, or like Flowers, to get to the top of the route so you can make a move. And all of that takes 2.5, 3 seconds. And the Ravens didn't always have that in this game. So that obviously was a problem. But the results are just awful. They turned everybody into a short yardage receiver in this game. Likely, basically got all his targets behind the line of scrimmage. He had 40 yards receiving and 44 yards of yak in this game. So maybe not every target was behind the line of scrimmage, but he had more yak than yards. His average point of catch was behind the line of scrimmage. Beckham 5 for 34, so that's 6.8. That's not what you want. We're not seeing the kind of the breakaway slant ability, even though he caught a couple nice slants. He didn't really break one off for a big gain this game. Flowers, probably the most disappointing, 8 for 25, so 3.1 yards per target. Now, Flowers won the ball game with a great run at the end, but he also didn't do a whole lot as receiver, which I don't really blame on him. I blame on the Ravens not really having an answer for how to get tackle help and create some additional time and space for Lamar. Bateman 5 catches for 21. So just is a miserable yards per target game for the Ravens. So it got really ugly. It was Dean Leonard, by the way, but it's a group they should have done a lot better against, and they definitely did not find the Mark Andrews replacement in this game. As I said, the closest thing to an extended play guy they had was Mitchell on really one play. I even struggled to think of one other play that was extended where they had a completion.
Yeah, I mean, when the game started, the first couple drives, I mean, it was very encouraging. I mean, Lamar was just dealing to everybody, and everybody was getting open, and it kind of looked like we might expect, given the sort of the metrics that you cited just a little bit earlier. Yeah, I mean, it was really a shame to see Likely disappear from the game script, really, after those first couple drives, because he was catching everything that was coming his way. He was making plays. Really my only complaint with Likely was that he was trying to hurdle a little bit too much, and you and I are both not fans, not fans of that. But if I ever see another pass behind the line of scrimmage, it'll be too soon. I'm so sick of it. It's just like players are way too fast these days defensive players are way too fast these days to really make that pay off on a regular basis. But the search for replacing Mark Andrews' productivity continues.
Move over to the defense.
Yeah. So, Ken, like you and I kind of discussed, in the production meeting, there's really very little to complain about with the defense. The defense really bailed the offense out this week, really performed exceptionally well. I mean, there were a couple of drives where the Chargers were able to move the ball on them, but they capitalized very little. Kind of like our offense capitalized very little on the 4 turnovers the defense gave them, which is just extraordinarily frustrating. But really, this game kind of highlighted my main concern with the defense, and that's the defensive line rotation. They play an unbelievable number of snaps this week. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but they just had to play so much due to the offense's inefficiency. So I think the bye week might be a really, really good time to bring in somebody. It doesn't have to be Ndamukong Suh. It could be, I'm sure there are plenty of people on the practice squads, defensive line depth throughout the league. Just somebody to eat a few snaps.
It could be. And I would be in favor of having a 6th active defensive lineman on game day. But the Ravens' most recent move was to go down to 4 against the Bengals, not go in the other direction. That's a special teams coach really valuing that element of the game. And I'm not a fan. I think you go down a special teams player. Well, okay, special teams honestly is not that big a part of the game anymore. If you're losing a big man, you replace him with another defensive lineman. You've got the guy you need on a field goal block unit. Say,
yeah.
If it's a punt coverage team, that's the most significant time where you need special teams player. Kickoff coverage is almost to nothing now as it is. So I don't know why you feel like you need that extra player there when it's obvious you lose a ton when you go even from 5 to 4 due to an in-game injury on the defensive line.
Ken, Jalen Armour Davis's talent just must be way too tantalizing.
See, I thought we were going to drop the funny stuff for this episode.
Bitter sarcasm is always going to be in my tool bag. No, I don't get it. There are guys that are that are game day activations every week who contribute little to nothing to this team, and I think they're going to sorely regret it when when there is an injury on the defensive line. I mean, this week, Justin Madubuike got a concussion. I mean, as I recall, it was fairly late in the game. But I mean, imagine if that had happened the week that we started 4 defensive linemen. I mean, and happened early on in the game. I mean, just complete. It's malpractice, right? So there are things they can do, right? Like they really haven't been kicking in their outside linebackers at all. And I don't have a problem, obviously, with how they've been using their outside linebackers because they've been extremely effective. But they need to figure something out. They need to get more bodies in there. Those guys are courting disaster, I think.
What's interesting about this is they did go back to 2 snaps of rush nickel this week, where they had all 3 of their big 3 rush outside linebackers say in the game to replace a defensive lineman. But you mentioned the snaps, and both Pierce and Madubuike had 40 non-penalty snaps in this game. So probably a few more than that if you look at the game book. But those are contested snaps that they actually played. That's a ton of snaps. Yeah. And, you come back to the possibility of a Neal ending the game and them getting 5 less snaps out of that really looks kind of more important within that, in that context.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got one other thing to say about the defense that I want to bring to, because, honestly, there's not too much to say about this defense that needs to. I don't want them to try and get better on run defense, because I think they're balancing exactly what they're doing correctly in terms of how they're scheming it. They're going for allowing a little more on the run and taking away things on the pass, and they're taking away a hell of a lot more in terms of the pass than what they're giving up on the run. So I think that's special. But if I had to point to one thing, it's controlling the missed tackles. And they've done a good job these last 4 weeks where they've had 2, 11, 5, and 3 missed tackles. Now, I'm using the PFF missed tackles, different sources, different missed tackle totals.
Aaron Rodgers' season is officially over, but yours has just begun at MyBookie. NFL, college ball, and a brand new cash-out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. First 2 legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and place another bet, or let it ride for a chance at an even bigger payday. Join us at MyBookie for an entire season filled with daily odd boost, same-game parlays, and huge prize pool contests. Right now, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on your first deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly credited to your MyBookie account. That's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash bonus now. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie.
PFF is usually very harsh on missed tackles. They assign more of them. So, that's 21 in 4 games, 5.25 per game the last 4. They're at 7.5 per game for the year, and they were 8.6 per game for the first 8 weeks of the year. There's really 2 places where they need to figure things out. First is the most costly missed tackles occur in the secondary. If you can eliminate those or reduce those to a manageable level, you'll never eliminate them. You're doing well. Unfortunately, the 2 players who are not tackling well this year are Stone and Queen. And Queen is a longstanding problem, and he's has hot flashes of great tackle play, and then he goes back to some old habits and he misses tackles and doesn't wrap up properly. He hasn't really been throwing his shoulder around the same way, so I'm not sure what the mechanical issue is. It's just he's still missing some tackles. He missed 2 more in this game. 1 in the backfield for -4, which didn't seem like a big problem until he got up. Owe made the tackle for -1. Queen got up and slammed into the helmet of Matabike and concussed him. And so you have these things kind of keep showing up. In terms of Stone, I mean, it's one of the reasons he might not make the Pro Bowl is that he hasn't been a particularly great tackler this year. So I'd hope he could come on. His position kind of requires you to be a good tackle. It's part of the job description. So he better do that. But if in looking for defenses, I'm really picking nits to pick on those 2 guys as people who need to improve tackle rates when, generally speaking, the defense is playing at an extraordinary level.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for Queen, I think, sometimes it's just a kind of a focus thing. I mean, he gets so wrapped up in whatever he's called to do on the play that, sometimes when it comes time to execute at that exact moment, sometimes I think maybe he loses a little bit of focus, but he's capable. I mean, we've seen long stretches where he really can do a fantastic job. So, he can work on those fundamentals. But speaking of, poor tackling, I have to say, I think these last 2 weeks I've been kind of encouraged about Marcus Williams' progression.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I was curious what you thought. He really does, like, when Harbaugh and the rest of them were sort of saying like he's getting better each and every week, and you're just kind of like blow that off as like coach speak, like yeah, okay, this is we're gonna keep seeing this the rest of the year, but yeah, he's been looking better, and I'm very encouraged to see what he's going to look like after the bye week.
Yeah, the problem with something like that is it might be true, but you don't have any context to be certain of that, because there's so much coach speak that goes on, generally speaking. And he didn't go out of his way with Marcus Williams to give you, some kind of alliterative pegging or something that would indicate what his true feelings on the matter were. So if you're reading between the lines on interviews, and I try and do that, it's very hard to get a reading on that when he's using generic coach speak. In fact, maybe he should, do some self-scouting on that and really use more generic no comment talk with regard to all injuries. So he doesn't find him saying, I don't think it's anything serious. And have that be his comment when somebody is coming back, but say, I can't really talk about that, or, we're not really sure at this point. I would call him day to day, and then you realize that means something else. Don't give the other people any opportunity to decode your speech.
Yeah.
You're a lawyer, Slava. So, one of the things that'll come off of it is the only comment is no comment. Our only comment is no comment. When we were doing things like acquiring companies, and there would be, potential malfeasance in terms of insider trading and whatnot, you don't want to get involved in any of that. You just want to have your only comment be no comment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think, and here we're moving on to coaching. It's been discussed to death a little bit this week. Harbaugh's lack of challenges on the two would-be first down spots, and in particular the one where Lamar sort of stretched clearly over the first down marker, and that failure to pick up that first down resulted in the end of a drive, or eventually did. I think then they went for it on fourth down. Yeah, and they didn't pick it up. So it was pretty consequential. So, you do kind of lay that at the feet of the coaching staff, but there is another angle to this, I think. And that is, the players, Lamar knows he picked up that first down ostensibly, right? And the players should be able to, signal to the coach, challenges. Maybe Lamar just didn't have any reason to believe that there was going to be a problem to challenge it. But at that point, when they say it's, think about this. This is a situation where it's offense, right? So you have time to decide whether you're going to challenge. It's not like, defensive play, defensive play where the opposing offense is going to try to rush into the next play, right? You have the time. So there should be some communication between Lamar and Harbaugh to sort of say, hey, I'm pretty sure I picked that up. Even if they thought, well, it's not worth wasting a challenge because we're going to, pick it up on fourth down. I think that's kind of a silly decision if that's what they made, because it's not like it's bringing up 3rd and 1, right? It's bringing up 4th and 1.
Yes, I agree.
That's hugely consequential, particularly in the way that this game played out, particularly in the way that, the offense was very inefficient in terms of serious success rate, in terms of keeping their defensive guys off the field.
Yeah, so there are 3 challenges in the game. That one was one I thought clearly should have been a challenge made. I think you have a potentially large gain in avoiding a 4th and 1 situation. We've talked about this before on this show and a lot on my show about really wanting to avoid a lot of these very high leverage plays against an opponent who's not as good as you. And that's what the Chargers were. They were just not as good as the Ravens. So you don't want to play a lot of those plays. So get that challenge made on 3rd and 1. The next one was the Aguilar one. That one was obvious that he made it, but still probably not worth the challenge, in my opinion, because it brought up a 3rd and 1. And I think they might have thrown an incomplete pass on 3rd and 1 and then made it on 4th and 1 that time. So maybe with Mitchell, might have been Edwards again, because he had one twisting first down. So anyway, I was okay with not challenging that one. I thought the amount of gain on, when you're on third, when the other alternative is 3rd and 1 is so small that I understand not going for it. And then the last challenge was on that lateral. Now, a lot of people say, well, look, anybody could see that, it was, the lateral was clearly very lateral in terms of the 42-yard line, or whatever the exact line of the throw was. I think that was obvious after multiple reviews. I think if the Ravens were unsure about it at the time, they had to throw the flag. And of course, at that point, the Chargers were trying to get to the line of scrimmage quickly and run that play, contrary to the offensive opportunities. Then I think that's a good challenge to take, even at the risk of a timeout, because it's an enormously high leverage play. You get the other team off the field. It's basically a turnover if you win that challenge. So I thought it was worth the risk. And I basically agree with 2 of the 3 Harbaugh decisions. The first one I would have challenged, as you mentioned and brought up as your main point.
Yeah. And then I guess the flip side to it is if you challenge the ones that are obvious, you get the third challenge, right? So
Yeah.
you could have had the benefit of the benefit of all three. But not every challenge or no challenge is made equal. So, but for sure this was a poor performance in that respect, and I think the Ravens need to make sure that their players are sort of empowered to communicate with the staff about their belief or non-belief that that the play should be challenged.
That's a great point. That there has to be a player side to this. I want to dovetail into my next point, which is in the coaching, that the Ravens need to do something to improve players' situational awareness. And of course, I'm pointing directly at the non-kneel by Flowers. Now, let's start with what's the generalized context of this. So first of all, Flowers won the Ravens the ball game with that play. So let's not minimize what he did in any way. Great play, great player. He's not a player we're going to take off the field for anything he did here, but it is a case where he took a 100% chance to win when the Ravens were past the line to gain, when he'd achieved the first down already, and he turned it into roughly a 99% chance by going into the end zone. It is a hard nut to swallow for a lot of Ravens fans that the ball can occasionally be worth mathematically more than 8 points. Don't say you understand the math until you can say you can accept that precept, because it's absolutely true that there are occasions in the NFL where the ball is worth more than one score. And if you go up a second score, that doesn't mean you're in a better position. So that's what, in fact, we had in this particular situation. There are fairly recent games, including the Browns' loss in week 2 last year, that underscored this exact situation not being a good one. But anyway, getting back to how you fix this, I want there to be an element of player awareness that is required at all times on the field. I want the players to be thinking, hold on, do I go down or do I not here? Do I ask the question about whether it's time to go down? Because the quarterback can do that in the huddle. He should be wondering, what the thing. Flowers has got to know better. The receivers, because they're often any ball carrier is out there, need to be more aware of this kind of thing. And that frustrates me, but I also think it's fair to blame the coaching for not having the code word in the huddle on that play. And the fact that the NBC crew picked it up with Garrett, his former head coach, and then went to all these different shots on the sideline, which exactly captured the frustration level over the play. First from Roquan Smith, walking away from the end zone where the touchdown was scored, shaking his head. That's not something a defensive player does when they're happy. Yeah, we won the ball game with that fourth down. You had then, Lewis, he came to the sidelines. Flowers came to the sidelines. Eric DeCosta is standing there in a suit. Eric DeCosta often is a pat on the back kind of guy when he does this. He gave him a side eye. Basically, he came up because he knew Lewis was going to talk to him, the wide receivers coach, and that was the first guy he met on the sideline was Lewis to have this very much face-to-face discussion. That was not a happy moment. That was a teaching moment, and it's frustrating to me that a player who touches the ball as often as Flowers doesn't already have some experience with that from college.
Yeah, and you get these weird sort of excuses during the pressers, like when Harbaugh's like, "Oh, I thought I got the thumbs up from Zay, and I thought that meant he understood," and it's like I don't really quite understand that, how you can, if you think it's important enough to just take a quick second to discuss this, because it is in this particular game it's likely the final drive that the Ravens have, and honestly even more than sort of the win percentage going down ever so slightly. I was like, okay, we're probably winning this game once he scored the touchdown. I get that, but just think about what that does to the defense and how much more exposure that gives them to potential injury or anything like that. At that point, you can minimize the entire team's exposure to any sort of injury risk at that point, because then you just have, however many knees you're going to take, you're going to kick the field goal, or you're going to do whatever. I assume that they would have been able to take the clock down at 0. So, it's just take the time to communicate these things, these very specific things. It's good that they immediately, the wide receivers coach takes the time to explain to Zay right in that moment. It's a very good thing. But some of these things you can kind of predict ahead of time, and it's not the first time this season. So it's really incumbent on the Ravens coaching staff to do a better job with that.
Let me ask you about one other player involved in that, because Odell Beckham I think he was on the field for the play, but he might not have been. He might have run on from the sideline to be part of that celebration, that ass celebration on the penalty kick. But that's an opportunity for Beckham. Has been in the league a long time. He's got to know better than that situation. I think the Giants, maybe when he was playing there, or maybe not. Maybe it was after he'd already left, that they were playing in the Super Bowl and they actually scored a touchdown when they didn't want to by being dragged in. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was. Was it Ahmad? Was it?
Might have been 2011, so it might have been before.
I think it was before, but I remember him like trying to stop and then like kind of turning and falling into the end zone. Yeah.
So he wasn't there for that, but Beckham honestly should know from his years as a pro that there's times when you got to kneel and do that. I would have loved to see Beckham come on the field, basically say, "Hey, Zay, take the ball here, but let me put my hand around your shoulder here and tell you what should have happened on that play." And I don't think it helped the situation to have Beckham, playing, loser soccer goalie, in the touchdown celebration. Just did not make sense to me.
Yeah. Ahmad Bradshaw, that was his name. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Ahmad Bradshaw.
You're correct. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I mean, I agree with you. I think Beckham. I think they've both been sort of they're kind of peas in a pod. Like Beckham was trying to get a touchdown for the longest time, and Zay, it's his rookie year, and he's excited for him and all that, and they got kind of caught up in that. But I agree. I mean, he needs to. And I think he's been a pretty good, generally speaking, pretty good positive influence throughout the year. But he needs to, kind of, be the elder statesman there and sort of be like, look, man, the thing you have to do in that situation, you have to get down. But he and the rest of the Ravens missed it, and could have cost them.
Yeah.
All right.
What special teams?
Yeah, special teams. All right. So. Really the thing that's sort of been cropping up a little bit lately is just sort of the field goal kicking game. There have been some block kicks, some missed kicks. And I think it would be incumbent upon the Ravens to do a little bit of self scouting on what's really happening. I guess you wonder whether the block kicks have had any impact on Tucker in terms of, him trying to adjust his game to kind of ensure, that he's compensating for that a little bit. I mean, I know in this game, he particularly mentioned that, he didn't, take a breath before or hold his breath before he took the kick. And it's really nice to get that level of detail from a kicker to sort of explain specifically what he's diagnosed to be the problem in that particular circumstance. But that doesn't mean that there aren't more things to sort of examine in terms of the entire kicking operation. And I think the Ravens take a lot of pride in their special teams, and they're gonna, make sure that they have that opportunity, or they take that opportunity to see if there's anything that they can adjust. I don't know when that'll be, but they should look into it.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree. And I think it could be blocking, it could be the hold, could be the snaps, could be a lot of things, or it could be something about Tucker's pre-kick rituals, as you mentioned. But I'm all for it in terms of the self-scouting. I've got one thing to say about special teams that I think actually could help the team on defense. And that is, I want them to adopt a consistent, low-risk approach to kickoffs, both kicking and returns. So basically, any play where you have a chance to make a fair catch on a return, take it. It's always going to be inside the 25. It'll take you out to the 25. There's basically never a time where Duvernay needs to be put on the run and you put your kick return team at risk of injury. And I say the same thing for the kickoff team is basically this Ravens defense is great. What they really need is low variance in starting field position to go ahead and work their magic and get the other team off the field without having short fields play into it or whatever. You're just much better off kicking the ball into the end zone time after time, no injury risk. And the extra value you might get out of that is you might be able to have one less special teams player active on game day. And you're not taking risk of injury. You've got your backup couple of guys that you don't want to play, but you could do it out of the starters if that means Duvernay's covering a kick. I think he's doing that anyway. But you've got a couple backup guys you can bring in anyway. You're not down to zero there. And if that means Ndamukong Suh could be your sixth defensive lineman, and you can spread those snaps out a little better, and you can be protected better in case of injury, I'm all for that. I think that's a much more significant payoff than having that extra special teams player.
I couldn't agree with you more, Ken, and I couldn't have put it any better. It's the sort of roster construction decisions or the game day activation decisions at the very tail end, I think, leave a little to be desired. And if they kind of examine that, they could really get some benefit of that, heading into the final stretch of the season. All
right. Slava, always a pleasure doing this show with you. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
I'm on Twitter at Slava Cooperstein. That's SLAVAKUPERSTEIN.
All right. Folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up. This is the weekend. I got a lot of people already who signed up. Would love to do more of these, and particularly any kind of thought experiment. And if it's a non-timely episode in particular, that's great. I'll hold it until the opportunity comes up to post this on a nice Monday when I don't have other content to post because I haven't finished analyzing the game yet. Would love to have you on the show, and I want to talk to some new people. For Slava Cooperstein, this is Ken McCusick. Say goodbye, and we'll talk to you next week on One Last Thing.